Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello student, welcome to my YouTube channel Poetri Ardhifa. Pada video kali ini saya akan membahas latihan soal yang ada pada chapter ke-6 buku Bright and English kelas 8. Langsung saja untuk soal yang pertama, di sini terdapat bacaan tentang Howard Kelly. Teks tersebut digunakan untuk menjawab pertanyaan soal nomor 1 sampai dengan nomor 5.
There lived a poor boy named Howard Kelly who was selling goods from door to pay for his school. One day, on his way, he suddenly felt hungry. Then, he asked for a meal at the next house that he visited because he had only a little money left. When a lovely young woman opened the door, he became too shy to ask for the meal. He decided to ask for a drink of water instead, but the woman brought him a large glass of milk. He thanked this woman and asked for how much that he owed her. But the woman said that he didn't owe her anything because her mother has taught to never accept payment for kindness. A few years later, the young woman became critically ill. When the local doctors gave up, they sent her to the big city to find the best treatment. Then, Dr. Howard Kelly was called in for the consultation. When he heard the name of the town she came from, he immediately went to her room and recognized her at once. He was so eager to do his best to save her life. After a long treatment, the young woman was cured. Dr. Kelly paid the bill treatment and wrote something on the edge of the bill. When the bill was sent to the young woman's room, she was afraid to open it because she thought it would be very expensive. Finally, she opened it and something caught her attention on the side as she read these words, "Paid in full with 1 glass of milk, signed, Dr. Howard Kelly." She was then crying in happiness. Then she prayed, "Thank you, God. For your love has spread around through human hearts and hands."
Untuk pertanyaan yang pertama, why did the poor boy cancel his plan to ask for some meal? Mengapa laki-laki miskin membatalkan rencananya untuk meminta makanan? Jawabannya ada di paragraf yang pertama ya. Dia membatalkan untuk meminta makanan dan akhirnya dia hanya meminta minum ya. Karena dia malu. Because he was too shy. Jawaban yang tepat adalah yang A. Untuk soal nomor 2, what happened to the young woman years later? Apa yang terjadi kepada wanita muda beberapa tahun kemudian? Jawabannya ada di paragraf yang kedua. A few years later, the young woman became critically ill. Beberapa tahun kemudian, wanita muda sakit keras. Nah, jadi jawaban yang tepat untuk nomor 2 adalah yang D. She was critically ill. Soal yang ketiga. Why did Dr. Howard Kelly pay the bill of the woman's treatment? Mengapa Dr. Howard Kelly membayar perawatan dari wanita tersebut? Nah, karena wanita tersebut ternyata adalah wanita yang membantunya ketika dia masih miskin ya, yang memberi dia pertolongan ketika dia merasa lapar. Sehingga Dr. Howard Kelly memberikan balasan kepada wanita tersebut dengan cara membiayai perawatannya. Sehingga jawaban yang tepat untuk nomor 3 adalah yang A. He was so grateful for the woman's kindness. Dia merasa bersyukur atas kebaikan wanita tersebut. Lanjut untuk soal yang keempat. How much do I owe you? The underlined word means. Pertanyaan nomor 4 ini adalah kata yang digaris bawah itu artinya apa? Kata yang digaris bawah di sini adalah kata owe. Owe ini artinya adalah hutang ya. Jadi pengertian dari hutang itu adalah yang D. To be in debt. Soal nomor 5. Which of the following proverb goes with the story? Manakah peribahasa yang sesuai dengan cerita tersebut? Jawaban yang tepat untuk peribahasa dari cerita tersebut adalah yang D. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is never worse. Jadi maksud dari peribahasa tersebut yaitu kebaikan sekecil apapun itu tidak akan percuma ya, karena suatu saat kita juga akan mendapatkan kebaikan tersebut. Soal berikutnya, di sini terdapat teks tentang Florence Nightingale. Teks tersebut digunakan untuk menjawab latihan soal pada nomor 6 sampai dengan nomor 10.
Florence Nightingale was actually born in Florence in 1820, the daughter of a rich English couple who enjoyed traveling. It was a time when upper-class girls were not expected to do anything except wait for a man to propose to them. Florence Nightingale rebelled against this. She desperately wanted to be a nurse at a time when most nurses were thought of as dirty, drunken, and unreliable. In 1850 she went to Kaiserswerth in Germany to learn about nursing. Eventually she became matron of a very small charity hospital in London. When Britain declared war on Russia, Florence saw her chance. She volunteered to take a group of nurses out to Scutari in Turkey to nurse soldiers wounded in battle. Before she arrived, soldiers were dying in thousands because the army had no proper hospitals. She managed to cut the death rate enormously by ensuring that patients were kept clean and warm and were fed properly. This may seem obvious to us, but in the 19th century this made her famous almost overnight. The war destroyed her own health and she was never well again, but she still managed to make herself an expert on hospitals of the world, and her books and reports were enormously influential. Almost single-handedly, Florence Nightingale created the modern nurse. It is thanks to her that modern nurses are the well-trained and respected professionals that they are today.
Pertanyaan nomor 6. The profession of a nurse was not respected at that time because profesi sebagai perawat pada waktu itu tidak dihargai. Karena, untuk pertanyaan nomor 6, ini jawabannya ada di paragraf yang kedua. She desperately wanted to be a nurse at a time when most nurses were thought of as dirty, drunken, and unreliable. Pada waktu itu, perawat dianggap sebagai pekerjaan yang kotor dan tidak bisa diandalkan karena kebanyakan dari mereka adalah seorang peminum. Jadi nomor 6 ini jawaban yang tepat adalah yang B. Most nurses were drunk and unreliable. Untuk soal nomor 7, Florence learned about nursing the first time in. Pada waktu pertama kali, Florence belajar tentang perawat, dia belajar di mana? Nah, untuk soal nomor 7 ini juga ada di paragraf yang kedua. Pada tahun 1850, dia pergi ke Kaiserswerth in Jerman. Jadi di sana dia belajar tentang keperawatan. Jadi nomor 7, jawabannya tepat adalah yang A, Germany. Soal berikutnya, what did Florence do when Britain declared war on Russia? Apa yang dilakukan Florence ketika mengetahui Inggris mendeklarasikan perang dengan Rusia? Pada paragraf ketiga, di situ dijelaskan bahwa Florence ketika Inggris mendeklarasikan perang dengan Rusia, dia mengambil kesempatan untuk menjadi perawat tentara ya. Sehingga nomor 8, jawaban yang tepat adalah yang A. She registered herself as a volunteer to take care of soldiers in Turkey. Jadi dia mendaftarkan dirinya sendiri untuk menjadi relawan untuk merawat tentara Turki. Soal nomor 9, why were there many soldiers dying at that time? Mengapa banyak tentara yang mati pada saat itu? Untuk nomor 9 ini jawabannya juga ada pada paragraf yang ketiga. Before she arrived, soldiers were dying in thousands because the army had no proper hospitals. Jadi sebelum dia datang, sebelum Florence datang, ini banyak tentara yang meninggal. Hingga ribuan ya. Mengapa? Karena tentara di sana tidak memiliki rumah sakit yang memadai ya. Jawaban yang tepat untuk nomor 9 adalah yang B. There were no proper hospital for the wounded soldiers. Jadi tidak ada rumah sakit yang memadai untuk tentara yang terluka. Untuk soal nomor 10, how did Florence save the wounded soldier from dying? Bagaimana cara Florence untuk menyelamatkan tentara yang terluka dari kematian? Untuk nomor 10 ini jawabannya masih ada di paragraf yang ketiga ya. She managed to cut the death rate enormously by ensuring that patients were kept clean and warm and were fed properly. Jadi dia menjaga kebersihan dari pasiennya itu, kemudian memberi makan yang layak. Jadi nomor 10 jawaban yang tepat adalah yang D. She made sure that they were warm, clean, and got proper food. Untuk soal yang selanjutnya, di sini terdapat soal berbentuk essay. Kalian diminta untuk membaca teks tentang Helen Keller dan menjawab pertanyaan pada teks tersebut.
Helen Keller, born in June 27, 1880, was an American author and lecturer. She was deaf and blind, but she became an inspiration for other people with disabilities. Keller was born in Tuscumbia, Alabama. When 19 months old, Helen suffered from an acute illness that left her deaf and blind. In a short time she forgot the few words she knew and became silent. She made use of signs to get what she wanted, but when her parents or the family servants did not understand her, she would be frustrated and could only scream frantically. In the 1880s, people who were both deaf and blind were classified in law as idiots. However, Helen's parents never gave up. On the advice of Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor, who was also a teacher of deaf people, Keller's parents asked for a teacher from the Perkins Institute for the Blind in Boston, Massachusetts. The institute sent Mansfield Sullivan, a 19-year-old orphan of Irish immigrants, to be Helen's teacher. Sullivan's first task was to break through the barrier of darkness and silence that surrounded the child. By means of a finger alphabet, Sullivan spelled onto the palm of Keller's hand the names of familiar things, such as doll and puppy. The first big achievement came when Sullivan pumped water from a well onto Keller's hand and spelled out the word for water, and Keller suddenly grasped that everything has its own name. 2 years later, using the Braille system, Keller could read and write fluently. She then wanted to relearn how to speak when she was 10. It seemed impossible at first, but Sullivan determined to help Keller. She discovered that Keller could learn sounds by placing her fingers on her teacher's larynx and sensing the vibrations. The stories of how Sullivan taught her to speak is told in Helen Keller's The Story of My Life, 1902. In 1900, Keller entered Radcliffe College, wherein Sullivan spelled the lectures into her hand. Keller 4 years later with honors and decided to devote her life to help blind and deaf people. Keller explained the problems encountered by people who are deaf and blind and the responsibilities of society through essays and articles in major magazines and newspapers. In addition to The Story of My Life, she published other works such as Optimism, or My Key to Life, The World I Live In, and Out of the Dark. Keller began a speaking tour across the United States in 1914. Because Keller's pronunciation was sometimes difficult to understand, Sullivan repeated the lecturer's words to the audience. Keller also began to travel and lecture throughout the world. Keller received many honors and awards, and she served on many commissions for the blind. Young environmental heroines, Melody Widgeson and Isabel Widgeson, are sisters. They live in Bali. In 2013 they started a movement called Bye Bye Plastic Bag. Melody and Isabel's initial goal was to make their hometown free of plastic. They even managed to get 100,000 signatures to get a local government support. Melody and her friends also helped local shops and 800 families to use bags made of alternative materials instead of plastic bags. After 3 years, the movement gained global support. A total of 13 countries showed interest in supporting this movement. In the last 4 years, the Bye Bye Plastic Bag movement has succeeded in getting 57,500 people in 430 locations to participate in preventing 115 tons of plastic from polluting the oceans. Based on a survey by Making Oceans Plastic Free, which is one of Bye Bye Plastic Bag's partners, stated that the number of plastic bags was reduced by 40% in 2020. Food packaging was reduced by 20%, cigarette butts were reduced by 17%, and plastic bottles and cups were reduced by 16%. Thanks to their persistence and seriousness for 6 years. Currently Melody and Isabel have more than 50 teams around the world, from Australia, Spain, Switzerland, to Greece. The youth have become the leaders of the teams.